Is it a reason why you guys are not paying whatever that vendor is?
What was it for?
The simmering unrest in Thornton Township in Dalton, Illinois, has escalated into a full-fledged political configuration characterized by the divisive figure Tiffany Henyard exaggerated her demeanor and nicknamed herself Super Mayor Henyard. She is currently embroiled in yet another controversy, this time over her exclusion from the Democratic-nominated field for Township IP Supervisor. Corruption and accusations of election interference are dominating the discourse, and lawsuits are coming from all sides. The repercussions have been severe. Her recent situation has polarized opinions, and her team portrays Henyard as a victim of dishonest political tactics, making her a lightning rod for criticism and a rallying cry for her dwindling following base. Her opponents, on the other hand, contend that she is using every effort, no matter how dishonest or immoral, to hold on to her position in the face of growing internal strife and opposition from a disillusioned electorate who allege election tampering and procedural irregularities. The machinery aims to destroy her leadership vision by portraying her struggle as a brave protest against a system that has been rigged to silence her voice. The debate revolves around manipulation, which she has called a blatant act of voting suppression meant to hurt her chances of gaining re-election. Her legal team has begun campaign offenses, filing lawsuits alleging deliberate sabotage, unfair practices, and a deliberate attempt to remove her off the ballot. Henyard accuses her Democratic Party rivals of planning to do this attempt to prevent her loyal supporters from participating in the decision-making process. Political insiders say the lawsuits are a last-ditch effort by a politician whose hold on power is eroding, making the already tense situation even more tense. However, to Henyard's critics, her actions demonstrate a desperate attempt to assert power in the face of growing opposition and controversy, rather than a pursuit of. Henyard has a long history of using her power to advance her own agenda at the expense of her community's interests, according to the Office of Justice. Critics say her tenure has been marked by overreaching, heated arguments with trustees and allegations of financial irregularities, such as questionable expenditures and accusations of misusing township resources for personal gain. As an example of her broader leadership style, which is polarizing, divisive, and self-advertising, while her supporters celebrate her resilience and defiance in the face of what they perceive to be structural injustice, reports of internal strife within the Henyard administration are escalating the conflict. According to sources, some of her most ardent support reporters are beginning to question her leadership style and are ignoring the mayor's growing problems. This disintegration of her inner circle reflects the mounting discontent among residents of Thornton Township in Dalton, many of whom have lost faith in Henyard's leadership and are calling for accountability, transparency, and a return to stable governance. Henyard's politicals has garnered interest outside of the township as well because of the drama's theatrical quality. Her aggressive style, which is marked by unrepentant defiance and an almost theatrical tendency for confrontation, has mystified the spectacle, making her a divisive figure even in the larger political world. Her decision to take on the title of Super Mayor, which some see as an attempt to consolidate power, has been criticized as indicative of her hubris and excessive ambition. But despite the harsh criticism, whirling dispute, Henyard is not backing down from her claim that she is being singled out for opposing a corrupt establishment. She claims that her fight is motivated by principles rather than selfish interests. The mayor has positioned herself as a voice for underrepresented groups in her community, saying that her exclusion from the ballot is an affront to her supporters' democratic rights and an act of personal attack. The township is suffering as the story progresses, with the political unrest in Henyard's overshadowing Dalton's vital services, which are already under strain from unstable finances and inadequate administration. The turmoil was seen by the locals as more than just a political show. It directly threatens the way their town is administered, making many question whether meeting their immediate needs is less important to elected politicians than settling personal grievances. While political observers disagree on how this fight will finish, some believe that even her most loyal supporters will be turned off by Henyard's relentless pursuit of power.
I've got some books at Super Mayor. Inside I have from the United States District Courtroom and District
Political unrest results from a rare event that was added to the local Democratic Party's long-standing conventions. The caucus was held for the first time in over 30 years normally in favor of primary elections. The decision to hold a caucus instead generated a great deal of speculation, particularly given the political stakes and the timing of the action organized under the leadership of State Senator and Township Democratic Committeeman Napoleon Harris was widely perceived as a planned attempt to undermine Mayor Tiffany Henyard objectives and ultimately her authority. Henyard, a controversial but determined individual, had been attempting to make it onto the Democratic ballot for the April election. But the caucus presented an unexpected and insurmountable obstacle. According to all accounts, Harris and his supporters set up the caucus to remove Henyard's list of candidates because it lacked a certified assessor, a critical component that her slate lacked. Without this essential component, her bid for a nomination was deemed null and void, and her name was essentially shut out of the Democratic ballot. Although the move appeared to be technical, it carried significant implications, political weight, which many saw as a planned attempt to bend the township's leadership dynamics in favor of Al Henyard. Harris took advantage of Henyard's disqualification to nominate himself and his slate, promising that his team would be included as the Democratic nominees. The consequences of this choice were immediate and severe, and Henyard viewed it as a planned move that wasn't just a political loss, but also made her defensive, while her detractors viewed it as a long-overdue remedy for what they perceived to be a more divisive and contentious term as mayor. Her supporters saw it as evidence that the party establishment was making every effort to silence dissenting opinions. Since then, the choice to hold a caucus rather than a primary has generated a great deal of controversy. According to the Henyard team, that rather than following a specific process, the decision was made primarily to put barriers in her way of being re-elected. They argue that the caucus method's deliberate nature is demonstrated by its rarity, pointing out that it hasn't been used in Thornton Township in decades. They also claim that the caucus, of more exclusive and opaque structure, was intentionally designed to benefit Harris and his supporters, allowing them to avoid more widespread public scrutiny. Critics of the caucus contend that it lacked the representativeness and inclusivity of a primary election where a larger range of voters would have been able to participate. Instead, the caucus involved a more limited and concentrated group of participants, thereby limiting the input of the larger community for supporters of Henyard. This exclusion is evidence of voter repression and disrespect for democratic norms. Harris and his followers, however, defend their decision by arguing that it was a practical step to ensure the township has stronger leadership. They believe that the disqualification of the Henyard slate was due to her team's own lack of readiness and adherence to the rules, and that the caucus offered an organized and equitable system, and her qualifying was the result of her failure to fulfill its requirements rather than any underlying scheme. Deep rifts within the community have been highlighted by the caucus's disapproval of the Democratic Party and its candidates, which has spread throughout Thornton Township and beyond. Henyard's absence from the ballot has stoked accusations of corruption, voter tampering, and the breakdown of democratic standards. But according to her critics, the outcome is a valid and necessary step to rein in the leader whose tenure has been marred by scandal and controversy. This has significant implications for H's political career because she was excluded from the Democratic ballot but is still unyielding. Her prospects for the upcoming election are uncertain, presenting herself as a victim of systemic injustice and a supporter of the integrity of the voting process. Her team has not ruled out a legal challenge to the caucus legality or a run as an independent. Although the caucus's outcome has solidified Napoleon Harris' position as a political power figure in Thornton Township, his activities have also made him the target of others who view them as Thornton Township dynamics are still tense, and the caucus has sparked a chain reaction that has impacted not only the candidates involved, but also the larger electorate. This is indicative of a party elite that is willing to prioritize political advantage over community representation as the April election approaches.
The way that the government always does it is to go and investigate people around her. And that
Mayor Tiffany Henyard made it clear that she would not be defeated easily following her dubious expulsion from the Thornton Township Democratic Caucus. The atmosphere was tense as Henyard blasted the meeting with accusations of foul play and described the entire process as a planned conspiracy orchestrated by State Senator Napoleon Harris. "You didn't manage any of this properly," according to reports. a woman yelled while pointing at her ass in front of an astonished audience. Henyard made it clear that the caucus was only a planned charade intended to disenfranchise her base of supporters and remove her from competition in spite of her accusations, demonstrating election manipulation at its best. Harris and his team were declared the clear winners. They solidified their candidacy for the April ballot, but Henyard's name and her incomplete list of candidates were eliminated due to procedural problems like not presenting a certified assessor. Infuriated, Henyard wasted no time in portraying the entire affair as a planned assault on her political career, accusing Harris of rigging the election and using dishonest tactics to keep his hold on power. Not one to back down from a fight, Henyard vowed to contest the results through legal action, claiming that the caucus was an insult to democracy itself, as well as to her ambitions, and that her exclusion was indicative of a larger pattern of voter suppression and corruption within the township's political system. Henyard stated that she would sue all parties involved in what she described as an illegal charade that is profoundly undemocratic. Her fierce reaction was both emotional and calculated, demonstrating her resolve to hold on to power and resist what she perceives to be systematic attempts to undermine her dominance. Her remarks, which have been filled with vehement language and promises of retaliation since the caucus, inspiring her supporters and framing her struggle as a quest for at the heart of her complaints, is her claim that the use of a caucus, which has not been used in Thoron Township for more than 30 years, was nothing more than a calculated move to keep her name off the ballot. Harris, the township's Democratic committee, pushed through this decision, which deviated from the more traditional primary election procedure that, in Henyard's opinion, would have allowed her to establish her candidacy and reach a larger number of supporters. Her campaign has been unfairly criticized for failing to offer a full slate of candidates, a procedural oversight that Henyard claims was exploited. She has continued to use Harris and his associates' self-nomination as evidence of a corrupt process meant to consolidate control. As the repercussions of this conflict continue to develop, Hen's determination to back down is a defining feature of this political drama. Therefore, this technique did little to stop her fierce prize of injustice. Because of her claims, the township's Democratic base is now much more split. Her defiance is perceived by some as a continuation of the backroom politics, while others view her as a victim of lawsuits are now a real possibility due to the chaos and scandals that have marked her time as mayor. And Henyard has said she is willing to fight to overturn what she believes to be a false decision in court. According to legal experts, although her accusations may not have much merit, the spectacle itself could prolong the dispute and deepen rifts within the community with larger implications, for one cannot ignore Thoron Township and its citizens in the midst of this escalating conflict. Henyard accusations have been largely dismissed by Harris and his supporters as baseless, claiming that the caucus process is legal and equitable under the current regulations, a claim Henyard categorically disputes, and that the community is experiencing anxiety and unease as a result of the line separating individual goals from more general ones. A local case has been transformed into a high-stakes battle that will likely affect the township's political atmosphere for years to come due to Henyard, which is contrary to general democratic values brought about by the controversies, increasing notoriety, and the legal and political issues that follow. Disobedience. Henyard's unwillingness to blend in with the background ensures that the drama surrounding her political career will keep trying regardless of how successful or failed her efforts to get back on the ballot turn out to be, along with underscoring the shortcomings of local government detention accusations and threats of legal action, which also reflect the enduring impact of ego conflicts and power struggles in shaping Thoron Townships. The Thoron Township Democratic Caucus, which was hosted at the Homewood Flossmoor Park District Auditorium, descended into chaos, sparking popular outrage and growing claims of voter fraud and suppression. The event, according to besieged mayor of Dothan Tiffany Henyard, was a planned charade intended to silence her supporters and keep her from winning a position on the Democratic ticket. Henyard claims that the confusion started when hundreds of her supporters were left trapped outside the venue in cold weather, unable to access buses that brought elderly residents to the ceremony, which Henyard personally arranged, reportedly arrived late only to be turned away at the door. The situation became more tense when participants said they were admitted into the building instead intervals, allowing only 2 people to enter at a time, leaving us out in the cold. This, according to Henyard, increased already high tensions and gave the impression that the event was riddled with ill-thought-out planning and deliberate barriers. But once inside, the confusion only got worse. We had a meeting wrapped around the block, and they wouldn't let us in. Critics described this as a planned takeover by State Senator Napoleon Harris and his friends, replacing what should have been a proper procedure that gave each candidate their fair share of attention. The meeting lasted roughly 7 minutes, and according to Henyard, her supporters barely had time to attend, leaving her supporters in disbelief. Harrod's charges of improper behavior were further fueled by the fact that Harris and his group of candidates swiftly nominated themselves, rejected any other candidates, and called off the meeting. This quick-fire process provided little to no opportunity for discussion, nominations, or input from the larger community, leaving many of the ERs who supported Henyard disenfranchised and angry, with no way to participate in a process that they believe would determine the future of leadership in Thornton Township. Very restricted access to explosive fallout has resulted from the tumultuous caucus in an effort to discredit her and her supporters. Henyard and her team have not held back in their charges that Harris and his colleagues are preparing a deliberate voter suppression campaign. The discriminatory door rules and the slowness of buses carrying the elderly have been mentioned by her as evidence of a conscious effort to restrict the electorate to Harris supporters. Henyard has also raised doubts about the legitimacy of the meeting's conduct, using the 7-minute session as a mockery of democratic principles and a disrespect to the community members who were excluded and unable to exercise their rights to participate. She accuses the township's Democratic Party of systemic corruption, which she says has been going on for years without accountability or transparency in response. Harris and his supporters have defended the caucus as a valid and lawful procedure carried out in accordance with party rules. Henyard was eliminated because her own team failed to present a full and credible slate of candidates, and there was no deliberate attempt to undermine her, though Harris has denied Henyard charges as baseless and politically motivated in an attempt to deflect criticism of her own shortcomings as a Henyard candidate. The stakes are far bigger than her short-term electoral chances. The caucus debate has caused division in the township, placing her loyal followers in a difficult position despite the perception of her as a polarizing person whose term has been marked by controversy and disagreement. She has portrayed the caucus's activities as emblematic of a broad fight for justice, following the caucus Henyard statement that this was not a fair process and that we will not allow it to continue. She has made strong statements vowing to hold accountable those involved in what she describes as a flagrant violation of her and her supporters' rights and threatened to take legal action against them, stand by positioning herself as a champion for those who have been disenfranchised and marginalized by the township's political establishment. She has encouraged her supporters to keep fighting. Both sides have accused Tiffany Henyard of foul play, and the controversy surrounding her exclusion from the township Democratic caucus supporters and her team has already hinted at plans to challenge the results in court. Henyard has also called for an investigation into the events leading up to the incident, have openly claimed that there were multiple irregularities and egregious violations of the rules that prevented her from being on the Democratic ballot, and that the cause was manipulated to ensure her removal. Hay ally Keith Price called the caucus the biggest fraud he had ever witnessed, pointing out that hundreds of her supporters were unable to participate because they were stuck outside. Election lawyer Carol Kraft